Tēnā koutou e wakarongo mai nei ki tēnei o ngā hōtaka o Koniahi i Kōrero. Koutou rā e are taringa mai, koutou rā e mātakitaki mai rānei ki tēnei o ngā pā o mata ora ki runga i tō tātou nei whārangi pukamata, ki runga i a Koniahi i Kōrero, ki runga i a Te Kuri Mako Taranaki rānei, kei te mihi ki koutou katoa o tira, kei te mihi hoki, ki tēnei o ngā uri e noo ki tōku taa, tēnei uri no Taranaki, he maha o ana pākaranga ki tēnei motu, he oi anō, ka waiho ki aia ki te whakamoho atu ki koutou katoa, ko wai ia, no here, aua āhuatanga katoa e Hinekaa, now is your time, kei a koe te wā.
Tēnā koe takutua kana, tēnā koe Te Aorangi, tēnā koutou hoki whakarongo mai ana, he are tarenga mai i tēnei ata. Ki te kore mako taranaki, iwa te kaumawha, tāo aru te iria rere. Taua wā. I kore e ware te wai i tae ki Rangiatea, ki te wānanga reo i raro i te maru o tō tātou maunga. Nō reira, no ngā rua ine, no ngā rauru, te awa tupua hoki, ti atu ki mōwhango, ki te roe pōtai o mōkai pātea e ki ana. Nā reira, e tino hari a kauwan te ngākau, hari ko ana te hoki mai anō ki Taranaki i runga i tēnei tua uatanga, e me i kawatu ana. Tēnā rā koutou.
Tēnā koe ai, tika tau. Nā, a te pōnei, ka tū te hui a tau, mō taua roe pōtai, or mō kai pātia. Yeah, you just like pinged my mind then that the AGM is tonight. So have to squeeze that one in at some stage too, around about 8:15 p.m. tonight or something like that. Nā reira e Hinekaa e mihi ana, ki koe, kua whai wā koe ki te noo tai ki a mātou o te maunga nei, o tira te maria e wakarongo mai nei. So, you know, here we are again, we're here again. We are here again. Different parts of the country are in different levels of lockdown at this point in time. I know that you and Mike have been working tirelessly behind the scenes and have had to front up or get some wānanga up and going around the motu as well during this time. So just tell us all, what's happening?
Oh, well, he kupu pai tērā te tireless te pāna ki ngā kaimahi roto i te mai hauora. Kore e mutu te mihi atu ki a koutou, ki a rātou, i roto i ngā hoipera. Me te maumahara hoki, he maha, he toko maha hunga mauiwi atu i te COVID. So just being in some of the hui and hearing, I think particularly this week, last week it started, but this week in particular, the absolute frustration, I would say fury at times of some of our health professionals and those supporting them in the different ways for the same things we've been saying for quite some time, since last year, since the first signals were coming that we needed to pay attention to the global pandemic. And whilst there's been an amazing effort, of course, I heard someone say, the current situation is because of our success last year, because we just did so well. It came out hard. The Team New Zealand 5 million thing it just worked and worked so well, and we were all, I guess, lulled into a bit of a complacency that actually, you know, he mauiwi nui rawa, multiple complexities, and so, you know, the levels of anxiety and I guess still some uncertainty amongst some of our community is understandable, because last year it was like, oh, there's this huge thing happening, te mata uruta ameki, and then we were all good. We thought we were, but of course the health professionals didn't stop, and so just to touch on 2 points with our mahi, not being health professionals, but being in a more of an advocacy role and trying to, I guess, coordinate and communicate as effectively as we can throughout the iwi and things like, one, access to data. That's been a huge call to support our people to know what to do. We need the information shared in a timely manner to know as quickly as possible what is going on and where. Like, where do resources need to be deployed? And that comes to my second point, which is, of course, that the disparity and the inequity of the distribution of resources, which I'm not going to go too hard on that because that's like a whole kaupapa on itself. If we did a show, actually, probably I'm not the best person, but the breakdown of where all of that funding that was secured to our government from overseas, you know, it was a big, massive loan they got basically to help us through this crisis. And then where did all that go? Where did all that go? A lot of it was corporate funding, without a doubt, and we know that because it's in the record. It's on the record. Where's it going now? It's certainly not going directly to the kaupapa Māori health providers. We know that because every one of them around the country is saying, hey, we've been doing this with actually resources meant to be deployed into other projects or to support other things. We've had to put that pūtea toward a COVID response and are still waiting. And that's an indictment on the current. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to cast names and say names and things, but the current response, whoever is leading that charge. And yeah, so just I don't have enough words to share my appreciation for the amount being done on the ground in communities, and in the face of also, I think, the quite scary now and increasing, I'd say, stubbornness. I want to be kind to our whānau. I want to say the stubbornness of some, and thinking really hard about this yesterday and about some messaging, because, you know, I've heard, well, somewhat heartbreaking to first hear it, but some people say, oh, well, they die. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a harsh attitude. And I'm like, well, it quite possibly is going to happen that soon. The rates are just going to escalate past the point. And I've heard it. You remember last year when we all heard the flatten the curve? You know, we were scared that it's going to go up. It's like overseas. It was like a hockey stick going up, kind of like climate change. Temperature's going up. And the thing we've got to do is bring it down and flatten it. And then if it can stop it completely, awesome. But at least what I'm hearing now is sort of like there's that, you know, the bar graph or whatever it is, the XY axis. And if the curve's going up, what we've got to do at least is keep it below a line where the hospitals can cope, where in different regions it's horrifying to think, like in the big Rohe, some areas there's like 3-4 beds in the critical care, and there might be 1 or 2 people already in those limited, less than a handful of beds. And that, I guess, I haven't really wanted to be someone's like, oh, scaremonger. We do a lot of work on climate, and we'll talk a little bit about that soon. And this, I'm like, how is it that what we're saying is scaring? And I appreciate, like, it's like, I guess, getting a diagnosis of any other mate, and you don't know how to respond initially. You might be like, nah, I'll be fine. I'll put my mind to it. I'll do my karakia. I'll be fine. But you still seek the support, or you still consider, like, what are all the things that I could possibly, got every tool in the kete to help deal with this. So I hope I'm making sense when I say, like, my thoughts towards our whānau who are, we know there's a few, and I don't think it's that many, who are like, never going to do it just because I'm being told to. And that's that. Don't tell me what to do. And I have a certain amount of respect because I understand the history of our people. And of course, colonization, it's almost like a instinct for your survival to not trust certain institutions. And they are, through their own unwillingness to be inclusive and willingness to listen to the advice repeated, offered freely of the experts of health for our people for so long now, that it's almost like, well, what do you expect? You had listened. But we can't do much about the past. And so right now, the messaging, the things going out and the scrambling, I think the targeting of rangatahi has somewhat annoyed me when I'm thinking back to, well, the tear, whoever thought of that, let's leave them last, when I heard advocacy for, can we have whole of whānau vaccination? Can we have a vaccination strategy that's fit for our people? And not even can we, it's like, have you even considered that there needs to be, like, are you oblivious to the fact of our own history, which teaches you something if you just even look at it? Anyway, so it is, I think, I've heard various ones say, it's about a week or two. Or some of his, and Dawari Tānui's one, we have from the start have had excellent information, insight, and considered educated response in terms of information sharing across the motu. So I think he was indicating, like, by the end of this month, if it's going to go to 3 figures, it'll escalate there from, exponentially. It'll just boom, 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 grow like that. And no, it still is. My thoughts are, we still have this window. There's a window where we can do as much as we possibly can to support our whānau that is sitting on the fence, they're still uncertain, might need some more support. And I think all of our efforts to support those whānau, and that then extends a measure of protection to our whanaunga who are, don't care what anyone says, not going to hear it. Yeah. And in fact might actually embolden them to go a step further to being like, actually, well, now I'm going to insist that my bubble doesn't. And we don't want that. Nobody wants that. So being careful. What was another one I heard? What was it? Vax or die. And I'm like, you can't send that out. Or people can say whatever they want, but we aren't going to say that. I'm certainly going to it's all a whānau response for all whānau to be safe, for our community and our society, our whole country. It has to be a whole of whānau response, and that's my hard line. and whānau select. You don't choose which whānau you're born into. You don't choose. Some try to leave, but I don't know what more to say. I know I might be smiling, and that's my instinct because I'm looking at you, my beautiful whanaunga, and I'm like looking at, I guess, through this mechanism to our people around the maunga, and so many happy memories, so much love. And so I tend toward the smiley, but inside I'm just as concerned and seriously dedicating a lot of time and energy to putting as much resources as we can in the effort to support our whānau.
Yeah. Now, so, gosh, I know. I get that. We're all smiling and it's BAU stuff. We're getting on with it because we have to. We're going hard, trying to, provide the supports where the supports are needed. But, in regards to the data at this point in time, and like you say, Dr. Rawiri Taonui has been great in providing that data to us actually publicly so everyone can get a good look at that. But what about the level above us, those of us who are sitting or who are on the ground and just going out doing any mahi, whatever needs to be done, kids are on holidays and that. What sort of other access to data is there out there for, that other level that's above us?
Okay, so there's actually, I might send you a link or put it, on the this interview. But there's an excellent map. I think Mike on the weekend, it got sent to him and he did a little video. Goes, here's the map, and it's on the official, I think, Ministry of Health website, and you can see where every case that's tested positive is, and also you can go to every location of interest, and it tells you the exact, like it's this takeaway or this sushi bar, this supermarket, this gas station at these times. And so it's something that we've been doing in the climate space too. Like when you read about, like, here's the list of places, sometimes the words fall off the page. There's so many. And for a lot of our people, we're not that motivated, I think, to read when we see something and it's like page after page after page. You just, your eyes fall off. But you see the map and you're like, that's my home door here. there's my maunga, there's my whānau living up in South Auckland. And so your eyes can be drawn to the information in a visual way on the map of the Aomotu. And I think I'm so glad they finally got that up and running. So there is that level of data that's available, but that's the what is known. And what we know, what most of us are aware of, is that there's an incubation period. So someone's caught this thing, picked it up at the gas station, whatever, and it's in an incubation period of whatever time before then that person may or may not feel sick, may or may not get tested, and then it's like a known. There's a known case. COVID is here, and this is where this person's been in the last whatever time period, whilst they might have been contagious. And so it's not anticipatory. It's not like, oh, here's where the potential spread is going or has come to in real time. So we always have to be mindful when we look at these data sets, whether it's on a map or in a pānui, it's retrospective, it's historic, it's not as up to date as the Delta variant particularly is spreading because it's so virulent. And so, but what it does, it helps to give us insight into, into where we need to pay attention, where it has been moving, and what else? I think, the thing I think that is coming to an agreement very quickly, and hopefully this week, is some of you may be aware, there's the iwi data platform called Te Whata. If you don't know about that, Te Whata has, I think it's mainly census data, but it may also be health data, education data for your iwi, for your rohe, and it's really easily accessible. You just Te Whata, click on it. And one thing I will say is that regarding census, we know not everyone fills in those forms. Not everyone puts the address where they actually live. And so, or you may have moved maybe 2 or 3 times since that last census, because, you know, it doesn't keep us up to date as our movements, as the reality of our lives, or there's a couple more tamariki in the whānau. And so, you know, the census data is only as good as what we have contributed to it. And legendarily, our people have gone, don't think I'm going to do that. I don't necessarily want the government to know exactly everything about me. But for those that have contributed to it, it has given at least some insight for our iwi to know, like, oh, this is the census data says there's this many of our whānau and they're living here, here, or here. And that last year during COVID, that was extremely helpful. It helped get kaipaks out as well as their own iwi registers or their health organisations, contact lists and things. So all of these things, like someone said to me, it was like 2 days ago, I'm like, data is like, we are the data. Like, and I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, like rāua, yep, I'm down with the environment. I don't know if I'm the data, but it's a bit of a picture of us, some of the information about us, but not everything. And it doesn't have to have everything. It was the last time you went to dentist. It doesn't need to know that. But it does need to know, like, ina he mauiwi, pera i te diabetes, asthma, all those things that can be actually helping to provide better support for you and all your whānau, because those are the areas that this particular mate, it doubly attacks. And, that's probably not the best way to say it, but makes more vulnerabilities.
And that's not unusual, right? That this sort of data is collected when people may be sick or well, I mean, I've never lived through a pandemic before, but I'm assuming that every time we go to the doctor, how are you feeling? If it's a new doctor, do you have anything else that you've been here for in the last, Me, I'm like, I come here about once every 2 years, so I can't remember what it was for, but I've come here. So, yeah, I mean, none of that sort of stuff is unusual, so people should be fairly comfortable, but I can understand why some people aren't. And I just picked up on you talking earlier about the resource going to, there's a lot of resource that's come into the country, obviously, to support the nation through this. Like you said, it's like basically a big loan, and we are hearing that it hasn't been going to our kaupapa. So what's the push there? How do we rectify this? This is like an ongoing conversation that we face all the time.
Yeah, it is. And I put it down to, ironically, it's a lack of trust. So that's a two-way street, that's embedded for, coming up 200 years. There's a fact, or a figure, I should say, that come from the Child Action Poverty Group near the end of last year, who ran some numbers around the fact that 18,000 tamariki tipped into poverty during last year. And that really brought it home to me about the fact that I'd been hearing millions of dollars here, and yet when we had the biggest opportunity of our lifetimes, because as you said, none of us have lived through a pandemic. We had all of this enthusiastic kōrero, we're going to build back better, we're going to transform into a better society, we can look after people better. But that, even though no evidence, that has not actually occurred. There's still so many, like tens of thousands of our people that haven't got a home, that are in so-called, transition or temporary housing, and so the deeper you go on, like, where do the decisions get made about where the pūtea goes, and how do we impress upon them the fact that they say equity on this hand, and yet they behave inequitably on the other. The actions aren't matching the words, and therefore how are we supposed to continue to trust that things are going to get better, that things will be what they say? And the only way, I guess, historically, what we've done is tried our best to hold them to account by saying, hey, remember, you said this, i.e. treaty, te tiriti o waitangi, remember that, we do, and just keep reminding them, this is your job. And so, one thing I wanted to say, apart from the advocating for data, for information sharing in the right places, in the right time, like so quickly, into the people that are doing the mahi on the ground, it's not just that data's going to go willy-nilly, your most intimate things, the things about your tinana, your health, your well-being, that's not going to go out on the public forum. That's going to go to the health organizations, and they know how to get. Last year there's technical issues, of course, some things aren't, there's no guarantees on the internet, but as much as possible, there's 5 million of us, and how many of us have had our intimate personal details spread across public forums? I don't think very many. Resources going to the health providers, and there's another thing that's happening, and that's around the efforts that we are trying to advocate for to disrupt disinformation. I just wanted to, it was clearly spoken to me by, in the EWTS, there's a rōpū that work around spectrum and technical stuff that I have no idea about, but they're computer scientists, and they were the ones that alerted. You might have remembered a little while back, there was this horrific racist rant, and it was basically and literally saying go out and kill the Māoris. It was atrocious. And so they were alerted really quickly, that's up, and they got it taken down quick as. And they've been part of this, since the mosque murders and Tautahi. They've been in this mahi. So they have some excellent strategies to try to, I guess, monitor, to track and trace where are these influences coming from. And we all know, mainly tāwahi, can't do much about that. But how are they getting to the mouths of our people, or to the pages, or to the information perpetuation? And so they are, best efforts are going in right now to look at the different ways to disrupt that and that disinformation. And so one of those kaimahi said to me, some of our people don't understand, even like there's misinformation, which just is, it's like a mistake. Like people don't even realize that's not true. That's not like tika, whatever kōrero is. Whether it's a video, whether it's kupu kōrero or written. And so they just mistakenly think, oh, gee, that's horrifying, I'm going to share that. And so it's not malevolent. It's not intended in an evil way to be shared. It's just, people's nature. We want to share this interesting thing. But it's a mistake, and that's misinformation. But disinformation, the difference there is that it's designed to hurt, to harm, to be preventative to the well-being or the health of not just like a few peeps, but millions across the world.
Millions.
And that is how, therefore, then the efforts or the, I guess, legally, the mechanisms can be pulled for, like, get that taken down. It's actually harmful. It may cause lives to be lost. And I've been heartened just this week in hearing that work is going on, and I thought I'd share that so that people can be like a little bit, hopefully, some form of relief. But if we see that stuff, there's nothing stopping us going, this is harmful content. This is harmful content.
Yeah.
And I hear the whanaunga over on the Tairāwhiti, Te Hamua Nekora gets regularly removed from Facebook, like for a month. And what we're saying is, like, yes, everyone's got the right to share their whakaaro. It's only Facebook. But if these people are disinformation and they're the source, to actually have them removed for a month could save so many lives just at this point in time. Well, we really sort of put all efforts into supporting our whānau that still need to be vaccinated. That's a real concern right now. It's a time-sensitive thing, they say.
Yeah, so I'm so grateful for that, for clearing up what's misinformation and disinformation. And there's also, it's my freedom of speech. It's my right to say what I want to say. And it's like, well, you can't. It's not your right to spread, like racist vitriol and that sort of stuff. So that, I think, is going to really clear up a lot of that confusion there with the misinformation and the disinformation. And it makes it actually easier for those of us who, having those hard conversations with people, like, okay, what are we talking about here? And, being able to actually give it a name. Okay, that's misinformation. Yeah, okay, so you got caught up, you've shared it because it's something that's, kind of caught your attention. But yeah, the intent is what separates the two behind the sharing, right?
It's a good kupu, intent. It has been used as an excuse sometimes. Oh, I didn't mean to offend. It's like, oh, regardless, it still was pretty damn offensive.
True.
But the intent and what was the word I was going to say? Oh, anyway, there's lots of that kōrero about freedom, the right. And I was like, well, none of the thoughts of any individual trumps the lives of many. Like, your thoughts about what could be, I want to argue the sky is purple or green, or, it's like, go for it. Of course you can. It's your right. Yes, you can have an opinion, a thought.
Yeah.
Most of us see it as blue, black at night, some stars, but, good on you. But when it is causing, or potentially causing, harm. And I'm going to say it's not just the potential to loss of life because of the spread of the Delta variant. There's been increasing kōrero around about people feeling intimidated, or there were things happening at schools. So children or taiohi, doesn't matter, still people that don't have much agency in terms of power and the dynamics of society. Children at school don't have a lot of agency, and so if they're getting intimidated, that's harm. That could then potentially lead to, anxiety issues or fear. And this current climate in the world, why add to our rangatahi feeling unsafe at school? Let alone just general the population, whether it's kaumātua, whether it's us in the, in the paeke age group. Or I'm not too fond of, separating out, isolating. It's like, we're whānau. So ahakoa he kaumātua, ahakoa he pēpi, we all should be protecting each other. That's just the way I think. But yeah, extra consideration for those that have less agency, who are less able to advocate for themselves or defend themselves against what is becoming a bit of a tidal wave nasty, of vicious, intentful harm. So yeah, he mahanga kōrero tāna ki tērā. And yeah, there's a pattern. I mean, this is a whole wānanga in itself. And I was just thinking before, there was something that was in my brain whenever I feel like, oh gosh, is this tika, kei te he tonu he tika. I was thinking, he kupu I roto I tō tātou reo mō tēnei āhuatanga. He kupu ki roto, he kōrero ki roto I tō tātou reo. And I try to search. I'm like, you know, my ki te pāpaku, and I just think back in the karakia and the waiata and all the kōrero shared in our wānanga. Can I find examples that help me when I'm facing this strange feeling of, oh, this misinformation or disinformation has captured the minds, and it's even gotten into maybe the hearts of some of these people. They will defend that kōrero that is wrong. It's simply incorrect. It's not fact. It's just kia aunei. And I kind of think about the kōrero e mātou tonu au kia koe tō ui e I roto I te waiata e re rā. And I was like, mātou is the base, mātauranga. E re ke ki te mōhio, e re ke ki te mārama. And this, that our people have kupu for knowledge, for knowing, and I guess in Pākehā, perhaps wisdom is a word that could describe one of those whare of knowledge. And a concern of mine, I guess, is that people are flooded with information and they think that's knowledge. They think they know because there's all this information, but knowing how to read or critically assess, like, well, where's that coming from and what's motivating? What's the motivations behind all that stuff? Is it to help you to be healthier, to be stronger, to be living well, to orai, you know, ora tikai? And is it helping you to do that as a part of your whānau within the community of Te Ao Māori, in line with the tikanga of our tupuna? Like just take that little journey. Or is it actually pushing you into thinking, you know, it's actually about an individual right? And that is the core tenement of, I guess, you know, in some countries, they fought for the individual right to vote, and voting, you know, because of democracy. But those things were weaponized when it comes to Indigenous peoples, and they come into our country and then they go, boof, this is the way. Any other ways? No, rubbish, nonsense, dumb.
Yeah.
Got no sophisticated kind of sense of your place in the world, and yet we know we absolutely do, because those knowledges, those eons of knowledge are actually what are going to help us, and not just this COVID crisis, but in facing the total collapse of our environmental sort of safety. I wanted to shift, like, I hope that was a nice segue, like, just to mention.
Yes, it was a great little segue, actually.
Into, the kaupapa of our taiao. And unless there was something else, unless you had a response.
No, that's where I was heading with that, because, we're talking about the misinformation, disinformation, and we actually deal with that in the taiao space often. And, you know, I think you'll be able to tie into that some of the kōrero about disrupting this whole disinformation, misinformation thing, not only with what's happening with COVID, but with the taiao kōrero as well. So, great segue. Great.
Yeah, I kind of didn't want to single out and focus in on, I've heard them called the cohort, the hard nut to crack. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever words you want to use to describe, but taua rōpū, taua āhuatanga, the cohort. It's like, well, that's a fancy word. But anyway, it's funny to see that the same sorts of people who are the most loudest voices in the anti-vax, for example, or also, say, anti-1080, or have had a kind of, I guess, I'm sorry, I don't know how to quite, it's a similar sort of our right to hunt deer, or our right to do this, regardless of the fact that deer as an introduced species is actually destroying our ngahere. not just the ngahere I ēnei rā, not just the ngahere that stands that we are able to see, which is hideously reduced from what once was, but also our future ngahere are being, destroyed by the introduced species and pests. So there's so much irony sometimes in the assertion of the right to be destructive and disrespectful and all comes in a similar sort of package, the mindset that it promotes, and it pretty much reinforces this consumable, this like I want and I can take, and then I can dump the waste wherever I want, and that kind of cycle of consume, like I'm gonna go and take that, and then I just not concerned about how that impacts wider. So ngā ere, the health of our wao, nui a tāne, and our relationships, and our health and well-being, our rongoa, what would be and could be helping us to be healthy and living in a more intimate relationship with our world, that has been severely disrupted, of course, starting back in clearing of the land and the burning down of many acres, hectares, entire forests, and at the same time papakainga of our people, as we know in Taranaki, that history, it's different in different places, but it pretty much the same impacts, whether it was clearing the land for farms, whether it's now the intensification of the dairy, that stuff, which is all actually about to tip on its head, because as of 10 a.m. this morning, the emissions reduction plan was released, and we as a nation are probably the last thing we're thinking about is making submissions on what might be for some quite an obscure and quite a difficult piece of legislation. At the same time, there's the water reforms. There's lots of reforms going through almost every agency, every arm of government, if you will, and so it is exhausting if you're trying to respond to it or just trying to become more aware about it. I'm going to try to just, in a nutshell, I'm going to quote our climate change minister here, where he says, there is no part of Aotearoa, no business, no community, no farm, no family whose future will not be shaped in some way by decisions we will take about what goes in this plan. And in a nutshell, I heard it, climate change, like colonization. I was thinking about those words earlier when I said, what's our kupu for this? We don't have a kupu for this. I te ao Māori, e kore he kupu mo te climate change, with the colonization, because it's not of our making. This stuff, kia au nei, he mokopuna climate change or colonization. It's just a natural sort of progression of that to our āhuatanga, the mindset of going somewhere to take whatever and extract whatever, whether it was people from Africa or whether it's our forests, and then now it's our knowledge. As I referenced before, it's like, what can Indigenous peoples teach us to help us save ourselves? And it's no joke, because it actually is now underpinning the global response to climate change internationally, like the acknowledgement that actually where 80% of the healthy part of our planet exists is where Indigenous peoples are. And so if you think about the way, then some might argue, it's because they didn't have any money to develop that. And it's like, well, we didn't need it and or want it. In fact, tomorrow I would happily clear my bank accounts if I could have a living ecosystem within surrounding our maunga. If the forests were back like that, if we could revitalise the health of our awa, have the shellfish and eka like we once did, money would be of no use and we wouldn't give a crap about it, because we never did for centuries and centuries and centuries. And so the introduction of this mindset that we needed to exchange our way of being in close relationship with our environment has suffered through no fault of our own, and we see that reflected in the health of our people. It's just because we haven't had access to those kai to our knowledge and to our rongoa, our physical rongoa from the ngahere and the moana. And sorry, going back to like that those whakaaro, what they call the worldview or the whakaaro Māori. Interestingly, it was several months ago, but Cabinet decided, oh yes, we're actually all for our climate work going forward, going to have as the basis of that or the centre of it Māori whakaaro. And figuring out how to do that with them is no easy feat. But we celebrate the fact that it's actually a mind shift for the government to say, okay, at the heart, the beating heart of this kaupapa going forward, Te Ao Māori, Mātauranga Māori, or Māori worldview, however you want to say it. And now it's a challenge to all of our people to start to feed into that, because those of us that have been pushing to have that happen, you know, remember the tiriti, holding that banner strong and true, like to put a flag or a placemaker to draw a line and say, you can't proceed here because if we're not participating from this point, it will fail. And they finally hear that and we're like, great. And so now it's up to them and us to get that pushed forward as best we can. This is only one part. This emissions reduction plan, it is being hammered by the people that have looked at it and from all quarters. And to tell you the truth, I felt like, oh, gee, our Prime Minister is sticking the climate change work that's going to be going internationally to defend, well, not defend, but to negotiate in the COP process that's about to start in Glasgow. And they're going to be out on a bit of a limb because it doesn't look good. It has some fine points and they will probably go, look, Māori at the centre of our thing, how wonderful, you know. They will do that and we'll go, yes, now make it true, make it so when you get back, let's talk about that. But let's make it as many of our people as possible. I would like to say it is not easy reading to go through these things, but we've got a journalist working on trying to communicate out, like, here's some main points if you do want to submit, like, and we'll put out a, like, well, similar to with the kaupapa, let's get some more of our whanaunga into the councils, like if we promote and push out, here's the information, here's what you could possibly do if you want to respond. It's not going to be the last chance. These plans get reviewed and revised and will be looked at again. But it is the first, and it's always nice to have something start well. You know, start as you intend to proceed. If it's, you know, if the tuapapa's laid properly, the perimeter will grow well. It's like let's start as we intend to help feed our future, to help it be robust and healthy. So I just wanted to signal that was released today, and it's got 6 weeks consultation, which is a bit rubbish because, you know, how the hell are people supposed to get their head around? Every ministry in this country has to reduce emissions or have a plan to how they're going to do it. And so suddenly everyone's got to be an expert on transport or waste management or, you know, agriculture is still not, it hasn't got its head around it. It's been given 30 years to get its head around it. Still hasn't. So... Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, you have some whakaaro. I can see you.
It's big. And yeah, you can feel slightly heartened on one side of it because, okay, they do see that, you know, at the core of it, Māori values seem to be featuring. But, you know, I don't know. I want to see the action that comes from that. And I want to see more than just the talk about it. And like, we're not really in a privileged position to have time either, because we know exactly where we're at. You know, I mean, it's like the COVID, and so yeah, I like that they take one step, but really, like with anything to do with us, you know, we're so fluid and changeable. We have to adapt to change on a daily basis. We get things thrown at us all the time, and it's like, okay, what do we fight, and what do we pick up, and what do we run with? But I just don't see that there is any excuse at any of those tables, whether it's local government, central government, wherever. Things should be moving quicker, you know? I mean, I see the bureaucracy gets in the way, but that's actually man-made. You can get rid of that. Like, ain't no one got time to be mucking around with that stuff, you know?
I agree wholeheartedly. We keep hanging on about the fact that a climate emergency was declared by our Prime Minister, and that's coming up, 2-3 years, so we're in a COVID emergency, and you see the deployment of resources, you see the comms, you see the stand-ups every day, and we know that because the threat of life is imminent. It's like actually this week, next week, and these months. But the threat of life is as imminent with the crisis. And I think of it like, in Te Aorangi, they go, oh, there's the biodiversity crisis, oh, there's the crisis of the oceans, and this part of the environment. And they separate it all out, and it helps them. And I can understand. It's just like when you go home and you're like, oh my God, there's a mess, there's the dishes, there's the washing, there's dinner needs to be cooked, and you've got to like just start somewhere.
One.
Yeah. So there's the house as the whole. There's our world as the whole, the global crisis. But I think it's been unhelpful that people use these terms like diversity, biosecurity, and we're like, what does that mean for the average person? Ahako he Māori, ahako kōwai rānei. And so it just helps when we're speaking about this for our people to say tai ao, or Aotearoa, or te wā, or te moana. It's just the whole of it, not just the surface of it or the seabed of it, the whole of it. And we're a part of it. Our contribution is, we essentially, I can't remember if I mentioned it already, but we're dealing with a waste management problem. The emissions are paru that we are throwing out into our environment. And it is, I was thinking about Pera Hoki actually a lot.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding me, right? I was just thinking that right then. I was like, this is the verse, this is Afi, that verse right now. This is what we are talking about.
It is. Tu apiti, tu aropaki.
Oh my gosh, it's the mako.
So, and for a long time, I've heard ones like, we should write a waiata, we should write a karakia, about climate change. I'm like, we don't need to write new karakia. We don't need to write, well, we can pull, to bring that kōrero to the fore, get our artists to do more. I think I've been for the last couple of years trying to figure out ways to bring artists together, and I this very month actually was hoping to come home to Taranaki and had spoken about bringing some Pacifica whānau to artists who are just climate change at the centre. They're kāinga, the mautere, the water is already coming through the whare, and I don't want our people to wait for the water to be coming in. And that's happened. Some of our marae have flooded in these extreme weather events, the floods, the droughts that have hindered is not the right word, but that have struck in the north and the east coast and the South Island, causing fires, like actual fires just burst into flames. Community near the Lake Pukaki down south, just the whole thing just went down.
Gone.
We've seen these things in Brazil. We've seen these things in Australia, horrifically. But when it's our own backyards, and I'm like this. Because I'm a film, anyone that knows me, I just films my life. I'm all about films, the communicating power of film. But of course, as a kid, I wasn't really choosing it was just like, this is the latest film. So I was terrified by Jaws. As a kid, I was like, I couldn't get the moana for a long time, and I love the moana. We're muckles. So anyway, Jaws, this powerful line, which is the sheriff who's kind of like, gotta shut the beaches down, there's a bloody shark, people are gonna die, and the mayor goes, we can't shut the beach down, it's our biggest tourist season, we need the money. And I was like, it's like the perfect analogy, like we can't do what we need to do to protect ourselves, to protect our community, to protect our people, because business got to go on as usual. I'm like, really? Until your teenagers get bitten in half by a big shark. Anyway, it's just so many times I'm in meetings, I'm like, you're the mayor. You're that fella. That's your mindset. And so one of the good things that's come out of COVID, just tying it back here, sort of doing this crisscross thing, is we've seen how business took a cut. It had to. The health and well-being of the lives of our whole country came first, and are still coming first. With today, I heard the extension of the level 3 around Waikato for the Taitokiro, the whānau in the north, are just beside themselves because they don't know, where did these people go? where potentially has the spread gone until the testing, like I said before, the data we don't know it yet until it lands, until the testing can be verified, and then we'll know. But by that time, it's already potentially in a cluster. Sorry, I segued way back into COVID. It is front of mind, and it is the health of our people and the well-being of our people, and our taiao is intrinsically linked. We know this because our pepaha tells us. Our pepaha tells us we are our maunga, we are our awa, and when those two things are collapsing around us, literally in front of our eyes, the global health situation now is, I don't look at those stats anymore. I just can't for my own well-being. But I have a lot of fun overseas. My papa's whānau, we're all based in the UK. We've just sent, or about to hop on a plane soon, is our whanaunga from Ngāre Hinekaa, Alison Cole. She'll be going to represent at COP. And I'm like, Scotland is a hotspot. Scotland is seriously. And yet, tōna kaha, she has this kaupapa which is about direct reparations, or money coming out of those mega rich countries, the ones that stole all our resources from the global south, that they pay directly into communities, to indigenous peoples, to localized regions, what damage they have caused, and what damage they are causing now for our ability to adapt, to build more resilient and robust protections around ourselves now, because the storms, the intense heat that's coming, we can't survive that in our current state. We can barely survive this year in our current health state. So a little shout out there to Ali, and Ali is going alongside Kira O'Regan from Gaitahu, who's been going to COPs for probably like 5 at least years, and Kira has sat in the Indigenous Peoples Caucus, and I've got a huge amount of respect for her ability to speak multiple reo and to support our whanaunga and help weave together the commonalities, to work within the differences, a lot like we have to here in our motu here in the South Island, the differences between our cousins down in Bluff to our cousins up in Whangarei. They're not so far apart. We're all he Māori, and similarly when sometimes you see these people overseas and you're like, oh, they sound like us, they look like us, their values are similar to us. So we've found some commonalities despite really huge difference of not just distance but of history. Some people have been colonized 600 to 800 years, and so there's different kinds of realities on the ground around the world. But it's important to have strong advocacy in there, and despite what you said before about our own government and the lack of action, and it's taking too long, it really, really is, which is dangerous, because it just really signals that they aren't going to change. Like if they haven't changed and they're not changing, means they probably won't. And then where are we? What are we left with? That we just have to force them to, and try to do as much as we can for ourselves, as we are with COVID. And yet the big thing there is the levers that get resources deployed, and that's what I commend Ali's proposal. I guess, I don't know, it's not a project, it's her efforts to advocate for direct reparations into communities affected the most, and who have caused the least damage. So mihi kaua atu ana ki aia I tōna haerenga, kia haere pai ai ki ora mai.
Tika tau. Ana, wow, e te iwi. So I want to wrap up with saying one thing, and then I'll hand it over to you to give your last parting words for everybody, Hinekaa. So at the moment, in those higher level, well, I'm not going to call it higher level, those other spaces, taiao is like a real buzzword that we're hearing, and I don't know if they really understand the meaning of taiao. I think they see it as a physical environment of like trees and, you know, and okay, the rivers and stuff, that I don't know if they really understand that Taiao is me, you, everyone. They are Taiao as well. Anything with a mauri, a heart that pumps, we are that. So we could easily talk about COVID in a Taiao sense, because we are all living in a Taiao at the moment that is encompassed by COVID-19. So there's really no separation. This is my point of view. There's really no separation there. If we're not looking after everything around us, then how on earth do we ever think we're going to be well? Tinana, hinengaro, whānau. So yeah, I think that's like probably one of my key things. And also just to tie in the fact that we do have our own healing and our own models of practice that we should be holding on to. And it is through things like pērā hoki and our own kupu, to start to, you know, say, actually, yeah, he kai tū kai awhitia ahau o taku rohe nei, o taranaki, and this is my evidence because it's in this karakia. It's in pērā hoki. We talk about it, the balance, rangi, papa, everything in between, and we're in between. Like it's not actually complicated. It's that simple in my view. And so for us to trust ourselves as Māori is so key right now. We know. And what we also have to think about is in regards to this vaccine, because it's not normal, I guess, in a sense. It has to be normal for us because we do have a whakapapa in this sort of thing, going back to the influenza, Spanish flu. Obviously, right back then, if there was a vaccine to have been taken, they would have. No one would have wanted to die. They would have taken that. And, you know, we can't fight something that's foreign to us with our own selves. We need something else, boost us up, and take on these foreign mawiriwitanga, because it's not a mate Māori, definitely not. And we need to find what is that other thing that can give us that boost. You still need to be healthy. You still need to be doing all of those things that our whanaunga are saying. Healthy kai, all of that. Of course, we should all be doing that, you know. Logic says. So, yeah, those would be my last little things, like Taiao, that's all of us. It's not just a physical, environmental factor. Trust ourselves as Māori. We have our own answers. That's actually good for everybody, not just for us. What's good for Māori is good for all of us. And look to our own kōrero, our own kōrero tuku iho for those indicators of how we survived. Went on a bit of a rant there. Engari, ka tuku ki koe i nai nei e Hinekaa, mau e whakakapi tēnei o ngā hōtaka. Yeah, choice. Mau e whakakapi.
There's absolutely nothing more I think I need to say. That you summarised, you summed up, and I think made really succinct points about the fact that we don't need to look elsewhere for what tells us what is right. Ka mōhio tātou, ia tātou anō, me pēhea te tuoro ai, te tūtika ai. And advocate too that we have so much in our lives that has come from outside of our traditional experience that we picked up immediately and take on as to this technology that we're using, the clothes that we're wearing, the glasses I have, that are all supporting me to be functional in the world that we live in, te ao huri. And I know that there's, I mean, I mentioned it before, the romantic notion, if we could go back, that some of us would be there in a heartbeat, and some of us are like, and a part of me too is like, nah, I'd rather be in the spaceships, you know, going up to the futuristic, like I want to be where those aliens are at, you know, where Tiger goes. So I'm like, those things, the imagination of our people was as incredible as our mātauranga o ngā mata, o ngā maunga o nehe. And so I think we have to really be clear about the vision that we have and how we're going to get there and get through this, because this is temporary. it is going to be hard to get through. It is already hard, like Auckland, 9 weeks, iwa wiki.
Yeah.
Whanonga in Australia longer, and those overseas. So putting things into some perspective about also what we think of as hard. Going back to thinking about, I was thinking about ki mai as well. I was thinking about, heck, how many weeks was it? Our whānau were stuck on a boat together. And knowing where they're going to get, where they were going. Nah, they knew. They knew the way. The whales were showing us, the birds were showing us, all of those kaitiaki of our tuakana. I roto i te whakapapa. Tātai whitu ki te rangi, tātai rangi ki te whenua. Tātai whakapapa is the core of who we are and our connections throughout the world, including Aorangoa. And this, those of us double vaccinated, that's now a part of our whakapapa to help keep us safe. And I think about our hapu mama at the moment. We're about to welcome in another mokopuna into our whānau in a week or so. I know a lot of wahine the hapu who this is the world they're bringing. Their tamariki will not know a world where COVID wasn't. It's like, the kids born post 1990 don't remember a time before the internet or cell phones. And so the change and the rapid change that is occurring, that's just a part of our world now. So adapting and changing, we've always done it. We're just doing it faster, and we've got to do it smarter now. We've got to do it in ways that are healthful, that are for us to be stronger. I don't know, this is a really long wrap up, but I'm struggling here. I'm thinking, so what can I say that I haven't already said that is important to convey? And I think we've said it all. I love he momo whakatauki nai nei ne hashtag protect our whakapapa. Kare he kōrero I tuatui tērā. Nō reira. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koe Te Aorangi.
Tēnā koe hoki o tira ngā mihi hoki ki Mike. Korua tai e whakapauka ana mō tō tātou nei iwi, Māori, putanoa I ngā motu e rua. Me ki, e hari I te mea, kei te tū noa mō tō ake whānau, ka hore, e te iwi. Nā reira e mihi kauana ki kōrua o tira ki o kōrua wārau hoki. Nā reira e te whānau koutou rā e whakarongo mai nei, koutou rā e mātakitaki mai nei, ka waiho tēnei wahanga o te karakia mā koutou, hei whakakapi I tēnei pō. Awhi ki Aorangi nui e tū nei ki a papa e takoto, ko tū kai awhitia te nuku, ko tū kai awhitia te rangi, tū apiti, tū aropaki, tawhito tipua, manea, nea, ararau e te whānau. Ko Mārie, ata Mārie, aua āhuatanga katoa ki runga I a koutou, hei konei, hei kona.